good to go. My name is Brian. I'm here to talk about ship hacking, data on the open seas. As the description said, this is kind of a primer for the ICSs and systems that you'd find on most boats, being cargo ships, cruise ships, and private yachts. It kind of encompasses everything. It's kind of standard across no matter where you go. The idea is the same. The networks are kind of similar. They just have different functions for what they do. So disclaimer, not so much for this, but there are some things in here that I'll show you. No unauthorized access to ships or ship systems was done for this presentation. No ships were harmed or put in distress, and public sources were used to perform all the OSINT, as well as all the all of the fingerprinting and everything else needed to be done for those systems. An overview, introductions, obligatory WHOAMI. We're going to talk about the maritime industry. It's kind of let you know why this is kind of so important. It hasn't really been talked before, so we're going to touch on that. We're going to hit the networks that you find on the ships, as well as the conclusions and questions at the end. Who am I? Brian Olson. I'm a volunteer for Project Gunsway, engineer, past work for the Marines. I've done some cool stuff for them. Is my hobby. It kind of brings me into the maritime industry. I like sailing. I'm an amateur tactician, and I do a lot of the regattas and what have you. And it just kind of encompasses. I like churning through data. Messing with all the systems on board, and kind of, it introduces me to certain people, and it just kind of rolls from there. Volunteer organizations. I'm the Cavalry. If you're not familiar with them, they're there to kind of, put a check on our trust in certain technologies. They've done a lot of work in the medical and automotive field, and then Project Gunsway is kind of a branch of that. We're kind of focusing on maritime. That sector. We're a grassroots organization. Our home is Nova Labs in the DC area. We share the Cavalry's goals. Like I said, we're kind of a fork of what they do. Some of us are members of the Cavalry. Again, we have day jobs in IT, but we focus on the maritime domain. And we follow their disclosure standards. So if there's a bug or something that comes out, or vulnerability, again, we follow their standards and pop it through to the vendor and what have you before disclosure. So part of the reason why I'm also going through this is kind of a primer. This is going to be our first year at DEF CON with Hack the Sea Maritime Village. So if you're looking to get hands-on at any of these networks or these tools and you're at DEF CON, stop by and we'll be, there to help you out. Thanks to, Fathom 5, Cyber Mariner, the maritime, security ports, the Cavalry, is a big help in getting everything together. So we're actually bringing, networks, a ship network. You're going to have all the, SAT, AIS, GPS, sensors, what have you. We're trying to roll in a capture the flag game with it. So we're coming up with a point system and how we're going to do that with the separate teams based on how that network is set up. And like I said, if you want to get hands-on with any of these tools and poke around, stop by and be happy to do that. So what's at stake? If you're not too familiar with the shipping industry, about roughly the size of the U.S. GDP, $19 trillion in goods is shipped annually. It's 10.3 billion tons of cargo. So everything is going through cargo ships. The environment's at stake. If these cargo ships, hit rough waters, there's something wrong with their systems, oil spills can happen. Cruise ships, again, tipping over, losing individuals, human life is at stake. You have the PII with all the systems on board, credit card transactions, what have you. All that data is stored locally on that ship. Private yachts in that sector, again, you have people on board, celebrities that they basically use that as their home, right? Or they rent out those ships. So all of their information as well is at stake. As far as guidelines for what's being done with these as they travel through, there really aren't any, which is kind of shocking. So there's people trying to lead the charge and kind of develop standards, but as you move from one country to another, there really isn't anything that you can have as far from a security practice to be held accountable for. A lot of the systems, they're just thrown out there because of ease of use. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, is kind of the mentality, whether it be on the ship or at the port. And, if as far as security guidelines, training people, that really it just started to kind of come about, and we're hoping to kind of raise awareness for that. Just to get an idea of how big these ships are, what impact they have, just a scale model. Again, a lot of these ships are carrying 11,000 TEUs. Find that as one of the bigger ships that are out there. It's 20-foot equivalent units, or the big trailers that you'd find floating around on the back of trucks and what have you. So with that movement that they have right now, again, we're trying to bring awareness because everyone's trying to go to autonomous, right? They don't want to have people on board. They don't want to pay people security, what have you, fuel costs. Everything that can be done remotely is, that's the movement that they're trying to have. Whether it be, steering the boat, robotics, autonomous operation, health monitoring, remote support, maintenance robots. I'm not really sure how that would tie in. But the idea is to have someone sitting onshore, basically remote controlling a boat, or having the boat kind of take care of itself when it's out in the open ocean. It seems smart, but at the same time, with the security posture the way it is, there's a lot of checks that have to go into place, and a lot of, revamping that needs to be done to a lot of the systems that are on board. So to go through some of the networks that are on, we're going to start with the commercial ships. This also applies to cruise ships. I know the containers there. It's kind of our forte. But then again, container ships are also in this realm. Communications, you have your sat link, radio, AIS, ship to shore, basic communications to where all your links are going over for internet, GSM, and everything else that needs to be done to communicate with the outside world. Your navigation, again, is going to be your radar, weather, GPS information. It's going to tell you where you're going, who else is out there, are you on a collision course, all of that info. The ship network, this can be, if it's a cargo ship, your timekeeping, customs integration, email. Cruise ship, it might be, your POS systems, credit card transactions, what have you. The crew network is generally, they like to say it's separated, but we find out in most of our talks that it really isn't. Where you have, the crew has their own email, Wi-Fi wired, and again, out through the communications. The network backbone, segmentation of devices from your sensors to your TCP/IP infrastructure. Your ICS, HMIs, PLCs, where all your sensors lay. With the cargo ships in particular, you have your loading and stability, which is going to be your EDIFACT, basically where the containers lie, where they're going to be placed, what's tracking inside the containers, weight of the ship, balancing it so it can safely make it to its destination. A lot of the updates and remote access too is on a separate network, and it's kind of surprising the way that works, in a way where those systems are generally always pinging out to home, that being the manufacturer. So if there is an issue, you simply call them up, you give them a PIN number, and they can log in, remote, push updates, whatever they need to do. And a lot of time they do that without anyone on board knowing. Private yachts are a little bit different. It's again, geared towards, the luxuries that you have at home. Idea is kind of the same. The smaller boats generally don't have a whole lot, as the bigger boats do. but it's starting to get there because everyone wants the latest and greatest. Crew networks are they try and be separated, but again, we find that's generally not the case. You still have the ICS with the HMI, the PLCs, the sensors. Your navigation is generally the same. Communication, again, ship to shore, radio, AIS, and your ship network. It's a little bit different, like I said, where you're going to have, your entertainment systems, your cameras, your cloud services. I want to open my blinds from a tablet. I want to steer the boat from my tablet. There's a bunch of systems on board like that, which, you will be able to kind of interact with, that these guys like having around. So the Maritime Protocols, NMEA 183 is kind of the old standard. It's released in 1983. It's a one-way talking, right? So it's not bidirectional. Very slow, updates infrequently, and just the way of the past. There are systems that still use 183. It is still accepted. It has to be because, like I said, if it ain't broke, they're not going to fix it. NMEA 2000 or N2K is the newer standard. It's faster. You can daisy chain the systems together, so it's all on one giant network. As a sensor spitting out information, these tools are pulling everything up, pulling what they need, and it's basically they're giant, sharing everything across one network. You'll see at the top right-hand corner, that's basically how the connections are. A bunch of T-bars with the sensors coming up to whether it needs to go to, a chart system or down to your GPS antenna. In the middle right there, you'll see all the sensors sitting below that yellow line. CPU in the middle, and then of course, all your charts, your screens, and all that data for you to read, sitting right up front. Below that is basically just the formatting of the message. It's all kind of standardized, and I'll actually tell you what system it's coming from, how it's read for each device. Time of arrival, so there's checksums and checks that are taking place. It has the CAN identifiers, basically what device, what sensor it's coming from, the length, the code, and then the field data, right? So if you're getting one from a GPS system, sometimes they'll have coordinates and what have you in there, which then they'll interpret and pop that through your ECDIS or your chart display. So we're talking about that to kind of put that in a picture form. I'm a visual person, so I like pictures and describing things that way. You have your HMIs, your Windows and Linux embedded, shoreside networks, network to ship to shore, third parties, and your serial conversions. You'll see here again your sensors, right? They want to know, the engine monitors, the batteries, transducers, how fast you're going, temperature of the water, barometers, what have you, all the way up, linking that into the TCP/IP bus. If I want to have it on my laptop, pull it on an iPad, take my display with me around the boat, see what's going on, pull the Wi-Fi from the, sat link that's coming down and all that jazz, email, music, whatever you need to do. So taking all that into account, if you're sitting in front of a system like this and you're trying to get in, you're trying to manipulate what's going on, what attack vectors are out there? Well, your points of interest, again, are going to be the wireless, right? It's going to be, cell phones or just the wireless link in general, the Wi-Fi on the ship. If you're there, it's going to be, if you're on board, the server farm or servers, rack servers that are on there, the SATCOM, GSM links that are coming down, heading in through the network through that. There's also the laptops on board. A lot of them are Wi-Fi. I'll show you later. This morning I had something set up where basically I'm pumping all that data through a wireless link and picking it up on my laptop to kind of manipulate and go through it. You can do that on both the TCP/IP network as well as the NMEA network with the sensors themselves. The GPS, again, jamming, spoofing, what have you with that, as well as the sensors down below as well. If you want to take control of, the fuel sensor, let them know, you have to refuel, you have to keep refueling. Or an engine, take steerage of an engine, give that false information as it's reported up into the ECDIS. Those are all things that you can play with and, disrupt on a normal day. So methodology, when taking this on, just basic is the way to do it. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit on these networks. You'd be amazed when you go through if you poke around on a few of them. Network scans, brute force, web scans, then manual scans, and a lot of it also is just, fingerprinting, taking a look at it, and then just opening up the manual online. A lot of default credentials are out there. Outdated operating systems will tell you a lot what goes on. Basically, just open up the manual and the installation guide and whatnot. OSINT. So if we have a ship, right, and we want to take control or we want to see what's out there, rule number one, just easiest way to do it is browse the web and see what's out there. So this site, myship.com, is basically Facebook for sailors. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that. It's if you want people on cruise ships, people working on cargo ships, people working on private yachts. A lot of times you free account to log in there. It'll tell you who they are, where they're going to be, the name of the boat they're on, where they were last. All that information is, up there. Again, this attack vector is going to be, a lot of, phishing emails. You pull their information. Some of these guys are, again, the technicians on board. Usernames, passwords, what have you, as well. The EDIFACT system. So this is the system that's used when a ship comes into port, right? So it's going to be kind of tied to port security. What containers go where? What containers get offloaded where they're placed on the boat, right? So I want to say late last year, this system was hit when someone decided to load all of the lighter cargo below and put all the heavier cargo on top, just to mess around, right? They ended up, figuring that out halfway through. It took a lot of time and money to kind of get that fixed. But then again, this is kind of the stuff that's, if you play your cards right, and it's just fairly easy to, physical security on the port side, head in there, manipulate that data, and have them load it, offload it, the containers where you will. There's actually another instance of this where they were, quote unquote, shipping bananas, but really they were just, loading drugs into the containers. The cartel would basically have them offload a container at a certain port. They'd roll up with a truck and just roll off, right? Just because they were messing around with the EDIFACT messages within the ship. This one I like to call Sip and Smile. This was actually, I did this last week. I was down in Antigua doing the Caribbean 600, just kind of sitting on the patio, looking at all these boats come through, talking to the crew, and social engineering was, a big part of it. Drinking beers, having some rum with some guys. Next thing you know, you're sitting next to a captain of a ship, telling them you do some IT work, and you're taking pictures of a server farm, right? It happens. It's easier than you think. Down there, everyone's on island time, so they're all relaxed. Don't really have their guard up. The shoreside internet and marina Wi-Fi is also a place to go. A lot of these crew that are coming off, if you want to, with their personal devices, The key down there is Wi-Fi, right? They're on a separate network. They're coming down here. They want data. They want to connect to their Instagram, connect to their Facebook, make Facebook friends. They're going to be on the Wi-Fi networks down there, again, which are not secured at all. If you need Wi-Fi, you just look at the chalkboard behind the bar, and that's your access to the Wi-Fi. The ship Wi-Fi. Now, the bigger yachts might have their own. They might still be using their GSM networks, but a lot of the smaller, mid-ranged vessels down there, they'll actually piggyback off the Wi-Fi of the marina, the yacht club, the bar that's sitting right there, as well. So if you're on that network and you want to throw a scan out there, more than likely you're going to hit one of those mid-range yachts that are out there trying to piggyback off that Wi-Fi. And the last one is pick any door, any door. So if you look at the top photo, you see that line of boats on the left, that little white line. That little brown spot is actually the guard shack. And I want to say 80% of the time he was just asleep. So if you want to go walk around and check these boats out, you're more than welcome to. If you want to take one of the dinks floating around with the keys in it and just kind of head around to the other side, I'm sure no one would really mind because it's island time. All right, so one of the other systems is going to be the vessel tracking system. We kind of talked about this. It was the AIS and the radar that's on there. This is what you're basically going to use to track a system, its course, its heading, the name of the ship, the location, as well as, who else is around that ship. And yes, this is done through not only with the radio towers local to shore, but also through the sat links when they get farther out. So that's what this kind of picture describes. You'll see here that when the ships are closer to shore, that AIS is bouncing around between the ships themselves. Again, letting them know if they're on a collision course, what their direction, where they're heading, what have you. As they go farther out of shore, it's done through the sat links, satellite AIS, where that information is then brought back to software, a site on land, where that is then projected online for people to view. There are sites out there, free sites, Marine Tracker, AIS Tracker. There's a bunch of sites out there. If you want to open it up, click on a red triangle, you'll be able to bring up a description of the ship. Again, where it's going, where it's been, sometimes the cargo that's on board, information on, its home port, all of that, will be on there for you. Again, openly and free available for everyone. Again, this is so if we take that into account of what AIS does and how we're going to kind of take a look at that. So AIS data is exchanged in two forms, right? It's your RF VHF protocol and your online providers and software. So what you are able to do, if you want to, you can spoof one of the online providers and basically change the routes. If you want to, have a ship, pop up on your marinetraffic.net and send it to, through Texas, you can do that, right? It's just a simple RF. This is widely known. It's been published before. It's just sending a radio frequency out there, telling them, what's going on, so that information is relayed back to the online provider. You can hijack the gateway, again, and move ships around. Again, all done through radio, RF, VHF, signals. So the global marine in distress, this is going to be also communicated through VHF. This is actually a separate system that you can interact with as well. This is basically used for in emergency situations. It is required to have this on board based on the size of your ship. It'll bring in all the safety information, weather reports. That's all done through this system right here. Radio beacons if you're in distress. Again, easily manipulated through the VHF and radio signals with your if you have a system that can put out data like that. So now we get into the GPS system, or Global Navigation Satellite. Again, this is going to tell you, kind of where you are on the map. The United States has their own. Again, it's GPS. It's kind of widely known. Russia, they call theirs GLONASS. European Union came out with their own, Galileo. And then China, of course, has their own system that they use for GPS or tracking. The graph underneath kind of shows where that is, at what frequencies it's done. We are generally on all the private stuff is on the L1 band, or on the lower level. It's on the right-hand side in that frequency range. The L2 band, you'll see that the L2, G2 is basically reserved for government only. A lot of that stuff is supposedly encrypted. But, I hear that sometimes, depending on, at least in the past, they've had some, possibly not. Again, and then the other one is going to be the L5 band, which I don't really know. Not really used. I haven't really done any research on that. So I'm not really sure exactly what that is used for. So with the GPS and the SAT system that's out there, again, there's communication with fleet to land. It's an always-on connection. Again, this is going to be one of those attack vectors that we talked about. Position conditions. It's going to be your instant access with your internet, emails, calls, weather, telemedicine, remote operation of hardware. Again, vendors pushing out updates without anyone knowing. Calling up with a PIN if you're out at sea and saying, I'm having an issue with the system. This is the PIN number. Guys sitting behind a desk go look for that, ping coming in consistently, pick that system, and then be able to log in remotely and take care of it. So that communication's always going back and forth. Again, we talked about the safety system with the search and rescue transponders and location beacons. So all that is done. So it's an open connection, generally always on, always available for you to take a look at. So if we're trying to kind of manipulate the GPS, there's a few ways to do it. Jamming is probably the easiest way. You can spew RF at the same frequency used by the satellite on that L1 band that we were taking a look at earlier. Generally not that hard, depending on how big your antenna is to kind of determine how far you have to be for that. You can spoof GPS. It's a little bit harder, probably a little bit more costly if you want to go that route out of the box. You can always develop your own. It has been done. I believe Texas Engineering Lab was able to do that, spoof GPS for automotive and GPS with the cars and driving. This system right here is just a simulator, just basically overrun the network. If you're not familiar with GPS, the way it works is it's triangulation. So there's 3 separate signals coming down to the unit or the device, what have you. What they generally do is just throw in like a 4th signal, and by doing that, let you know that you're 100 feet over here, 200 feet this way. Basically manipulate, where you are with those systems on board. And if you're caught sleeping, then you're going to be in for a rude awakening. Combining this again with like some of that AIS stuff is you can start to see the whole picture. You kind of understand how all these ships are starting to, collide, run aground, those reports that you see in the news, whether it be possibly someone sleeping, I don't know, or someone, messing with the data that's coming in on those bands and those frequencies. So this is what I was talking about earlier. So if we don't have access, so let me slide back one. And the third option, again, is injection into NMEA network. So if you have access to the network and you can inject your own data, this is kind of what I was hinting to earlier. I kind of set this up this morning in the hotel with the GPS antenna. You'll see the NMEA network sitting behind the laptop. Basically what I did is I'm sitting in Columbus, but I'm putting in packets into that network, because it's a two-way talk. I'm letting it know that, hey, I want to make my way all the way to Greenland. And that's basically what you see on that chart on the left over there. If you zoom in, you'll see a line going from Columbus all the way up to Greenland. It's just the track of where we are. You see the heading over there, 26 degrees magnetic. It's kind of the direct path to Greenland. The NMEA messages over in the middle, and then the NMEA generator. You'll see that in the middle. The NMEA generator is a open source tool. I believe it's a German tool. It's available on the internet. The charting software is called Expedition. It's a paid-for software that I use for some other things, but a good alternative is open source, freely available is OpenCPN. You kind of get the same results from that. There's also some back-end food with some kind of encapsulation that's going on there, the way that this worked. Basically what I had to do is I have a USB connection to the NEMA, and then that little device sticking out just to the left of the monitor is basically the Wi-Fi access point. So I'm spitting data in through my laptop back into the NMEA network, and I'm reading everything via wireless, basically encapsulating everything, manipulating it a little bit just so it's easily readable, and then the charting software is picking it back up based on whether it be the COM port, not in this case, but the wireless access point, just sending it to the system itself. The ECDIS display. So with everything that we talked about before, with the AIS, the GPS, the radar, all that is brought together on ECDIS. So this is the system that when you're standing on the bridge that you're taking a look at, your autopilot, all that configuration is done on the ECDIS. Your charts, your RNCs, your ENCs, your digital chart displays. As you're moving into a port, you can zoom in. I'll tell you how deep it is on there. If you want it in, fathoms, what have you, it'll change it based on your settings that you do have. You'll see on there on the bottom left-hand side, those green triangles are other ships. The names are popping up. You'll see on the right-hand side that all the information on whatever ship is selected is up there, as well as the radar overlay with those circles floating above. So this is another system, again, if you're on the network and you have access to the network, that's worth taking a look at, worth taking a scan, simply because of what's running behind the scenes. A lot of this stuff is running on a separate server. It's not proprietary. You'll see the requirements for some of these a lot of them are Windows NT based. If you run a scan, again, it's just things that pop up that are this mentality that they have, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It's, throughout the industry. You'll see one of the systems right here on the right-hand side is a Linux-based. I don't want to say a company name, but the kernel is, has been supported, since 2020, a few years now, 2014, something like that. And this is, again, just open source, taking a look at what systems are out there, pulling down the manuals from the website, and then just kind of doing all my open source research on what needs to be, what systems are out there, what's running behind the scenes, and what's required for some of these installs. Moving on to one of the last attack vectors is going to be that sensor control units that are down there. This is going to be ULCVs. This is one that we did in a presentation a few months ago. This is actually an engine control unit that we're able to manipulate, that we're gain access to and manipulate and control this information coming in and out of, gain access to. You'll see here that, everything passwords are easily readable. AMRoot, again, just basic information. An undocumented version of drop air, outdated. Just low-hanging fruit. So again, with those sensors, all of these sensors also have a web server generally attached to them, a remote panel. You can log in, take a look at, walking through this panel with the admin credentials. Everything is unencrypted. It's over HTTP. You are able to upload, without logging in, you're able to upload and the config files and firmware updates. The default pin, just by taking a look at the code of the firmware on the system itself, came out to be 1234. Left as the default. A failed login, again, provides that 5-digit pin, and you gotta call them up. They'll take a look at, what's pinging out, what system it is, and they'll call you back with, the credentials or unlock it for you. But it's, yeah. So, if you're not on the ship, if you're not on board, and you need access to this network, Q Shodan. Again, Google searching what are the primary satellite providers, SAT systems for this. Just a quick search in there, brought up this ship sitting in the middle of Paris. I don't know if it's one of those river cruises or if it's that restaurant that kind of sits over there. I don't know. But without even logging in, without even touching anything, I'm picking up all of the information as far as the satellite profiles, where it is, the frequency of the antenna, what it's listening on, the modem, there's a version number, port name. If you look at the right-hand side, all of that information is viewable without logging into the system, which is going to be your network. If I want to know what the internal LAN looks like, I just click on network information. It'll give me, what's going on outside as well as, all the IP space on the inside. If I want to mess with this ship and kind of change some values with the antennas and take it completely offline, I can potentially do that. I'm pretty sure also that these guys didn't change the default password. It's just a guess, right? Yep. So there's a few other ones out there as well. This is just one of the providers. Immersat, as well as a few other systems out there. Kind of the same thing. With some manipulation, viewing the information on the page itself and just browsing through documentation, you'd be surprised to see how many systems are A, outdated, and B, just have weak passwords and weak credential verification. So looking forward, what we like to do is examine the related products, the Wi-Fi router accessories, the HMI software, some rebranded devices that are out there, because like I said, everyone's kind of coming out with everything else. You see a lot of these controllers are put under separate systems, right? So if there's a rebranded controller, auto masking, which is one of the sensors that we worked with, you actually find that in, your Cummins engines, Yanmar engines, what have you. So it's across the board. It just doesn't affect that brand in particular. I need to clean up the NMEA injection. I had it working. It is a bit finicky. I'm hoping to do that with some of the other sensors that are out there as well, not just the GPS injection. Theoretically, it should work for all of them, but then again, it's the manipulation and getting that to work with stopping that information from being processed and put on the network from the actual device itself. Explore the VTS and the AIS, kind of get that working and kind of bring the whole picture together. Explore the GPS, that is a whole another realm of hard work. And then the other controllers that are out there, different sensors, fuel sensors, battery sensors, sensors that rely on the bottom of the boat for cleaning, right? That put out, because that'll clean the bottom of the boat, keep it running smoothly, so there isn't any resistance in the water as it goes through. There's a plethora of sensors that are out there that you can manipulate, take a look at, and then potentially mess with. So conclusions, what we went over. It's the number one story, man. Everyone that tells us it's not on the same network. It's on an isolated network. All the documentation says that. But when you go out there and you're actually, taking a look at all this stuff, the way that people work, they just throw it all together. It's just how it is. And there's, like I said, that attitude of, it's not going to happen to me, right? I'm out in the middle of the ocean. It's not going to happen to me. What we just saw that, I can view all your information just from doing a Shodan, query. I could potentially log into your terminal if I wanted to, do that and then gain access, and then poke around your ship. SATCOM terminals, patching, again, and double checking for, the weak and blank admin passwords. Blank admin passwords are a thing. Network isolation. Actually separate the networks, bridge, your engine room, the crew, the Wi-Fi, air gapping, would be a huge plus. Highly unlikely it's going to happen, relatively soon, but again, if you're going down that route of automation, stuff like that and policies like that need to be set in place. The wireless access, weaker blank passwords again, not only for the ship, but also with all the NMEA connections that are coming out, taking a look at that data that's on board and gaining access to those devices, spitting out that wireless information. And crew accountability. These guys walking around with their cell phones on the Wi-Fi network, taking care of their, kind of man-in-the-milling, compromising their cell phones and having that talk out to the sat or through the sat link as well is one of the biggest concerns of a few people that I know of. And we've actually wrote a proof of concept to control parts of a ship based on that, talking through a cell phone. Again, the Cavalry, we're always looking for people with interest in the shipping industry. If you have any ideas or input or just want to be part of what's going on, feel free to shoot us a email, check out the blog, and contact us. So we'd also like to thank Brian Satira, who couldn't be here. He's kind of our leader in Project Gunsway. You can follow him at Readout. Stephen Gerling at OB1666 just gave a talk at HackLoo. He kind of focuses on the private yachts. I know he's trying to do a lot with the autopilots right now. Another good person to follow if this interests you. Again, Nate, Adam, and a few of the other people. I'm the Cavalry. And again, the BSides staff and the company's Fathom 5, Cyber Mariner to kind of help us getting that stuff ready for the for DEF CON coming up to bring to you guys to kind of mess around with. Questions? Yep. I'm sorry? No, not yet. Yep. I believe it. But no, we haven't done anything with that yet. Like I said, we all have jobs like in IT. This is kind of like a hobby for us. We have, a group of people, I think just like we're like 5 to 10 strong-ish across the country. A lot of our guys work in SOCs, so it's all kind of after hours type of stuff that we're doing this type of work. But, that's why, if you help us out, shoot us an email. More than happy to hear from you. Any other questions? Yep. Well, sometimes. Again, so a lot of times, like when I'm going down through Norfolk, a lot of that stuff is turned off. You don't know they're coming up. They use that, again, they have that their own frequency for the GPS, what have you. But AIS, a lot of times, if it's on, they communicate. If it's turned off, then it's, a lot of times you'll be driving out and you just see a boat pop up out of nowhere. It's kind of at their discretion of what they want to do. But yes, if they do use it, then yeah, some of them they would have to. I'm sorry, there was.
What caused satellite imagery? How do you think that like being able to see a ship and like tracking its path is to like help out with being able to track ships better?
So I don't know what the cost is associated with that. I'm not sure how widely used it is, which would be my first question. Tracking ships based on satellite, wherein, you know, the VHF is kind of, you know, the standard, been running the ground. I guess I just have to see what the market is. You know, it's, at the end of the day, it's a business decision, right? Like, if these guys got to pay extra money to do that, then, you know, it's probably not going to happen. But if it comes to a point where, you know, can make them, you know, understand where in the long term it'll save you money after a while, I'm sure you'll start to see a shift over to that. But any other questions?